let's go ahead and learn a little bit more about how we're going to navigate the remote job market this year. Here are the topics that we are going to cover today. First, we're going to talk about trends in remote and flexible jobs. We'll also talk about the top career fields and companies in the remote and flexible job market. I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about scams and how scammers are still out there. And I want to give you guys some information to help prepare yourself or to be aware of those. And then, of course, we have to give you or talk about some actionable steps that you can take as you apply for jobs if you are looking which I think it's safe to assume for a remote or flexible job. So those are the things that we are going to cover today. So let's go ahead and continue. All right. As I said, first we're going to talk about trends in remote and flexible jobs. To make sure that we're all on the same page, you've heard me say remote job, flexible job. I do want to just kind of go over some of the terms that we're going to be using today. Flexible job, that is really a catch-all phrase that means any type of job that allows for some level of flexibility. So on the screen, I have different levels of flexibility. This can be in terms of scheduling. It can be in terms of location. It can be in terms of job status, like full-time, part-time employee or contract. It can also be hours, which would be certainly part-time, full-time. A job that offers flexibility in at least one of these areas is considered a flexible job. And of course, with location, it can be fully remote or partially remote or hybrid. One thing I will note is that side hustles are typically part-time, but they can also be employee roles or freelance roles, and they can be remote or they can be on site. So those are a lot of different ways, kind of like a matrix of what a flexible job could be. It could be more than one of these things. It could just be one of these things, but these are the types of jobs that we would feature on the FlexJobs site. So what I invite you to do, and feel free to add this into the chat section. I always like to do a little bit of a gut check on what I think people are going to say. But think about what your ideal flexible job looks like. You could have several ideas, something that might be remote and full-time, or maybe it's a part-time flexible job where you go into the office. It also could be a job that has a flexible schedule and does allow for remote work if you need it. So knowing ideally what you'd like or what you'd be willing to accept is really an important step in your job search because it will allow you to focus your efforts better. So go ahead and add those to the chat as those answers are coming in. For me, when I started working remotely, I really needed something that was remote because I knew that I really needed a portable job, meaning a job that I could do from anywhere in the US because I knew I would be moving periodically. And I also needed it to be somewhat flexible and remote, I knew would offer me that affordability or would afford me that opportunity. So for me, it was remote part-time is what I was looking for. And I see some other answers coming in, remote, full-time, hybrid. Yep, lots of different answers. So this is really helpful. You want to take note of what you are specifically looking for so it can help you frame your actions around your job search. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the trends that we have. I've got some statistics on the slide that were sort of, so like in 2019, before the pandemic, just under 5% of US employees worked from home full time. All right, so there was remote work prior to 2020, of course. It was a very small number of people. By the end of this year, experts predict that there will be 33 million Americans working remotely, which is over a 400% increase from 2019 levels. Now, I will also note that right now, based on end of year data, 27% of US employees are fully hybrid. And what that means is they work both at home and in the office, or remotely and in the office. Now, that could be 1 day in the office per week, or it could be 1 day at home per week. So hybrid schedules are going to vary, and it's going to be up to the company. 11% of US employees are actually working fully remote. So their job is all remote. So there are plenty of opportunities out there for remote work. The number of people working remotely full time has more than doubled since the pandemic. It grew very quickly over the pandemic, and certainly there's been a little bit of a retraction with some companies, wanting return to office mandates and things like that. But we do also know that more and more companies are discussing their flexible work options, which is helpful for those of us that would like a flexible job, whichever version of flexibility we want. We know that 68% of companies offer work location flexibility, meaning it could be hybrid and it could be fully remote. 1 in 6 companies is fully remote, which is great. There are companies that are remote first. Many that started since the pandemic have started as a remote first company. And based on our internal data and surveys that we do with workers, 98% of workers are looking for some level of remote work, whether that's hybrid or fully remote. So this is what we know and see based on our data. So when I asked your preferred type of flexible work, I knew that most people would have remote as part of their answer. And in fact, about 80% of professionals say that remote work is their most desired type of work flexibility, ahead of having a flexible schedule, ahead of having a part-time job, and ahead of even freelancing. So because of that, I do want to show you the most common remote job titles and the fastest growing remote growing fields, for remote work. So the top remote fields, typically these top three, the top two really, computer and IT and project management, tend to be at the top. Those positions lend themselves very nicely to remote work, as do roles in business development, finance, customer service, and marketing. You can see some of the others on the slide too. Now, top remote job titles like accountant, software engineer, project manager, sales development rep, product manager, project manager, product manager, and business development representative. So my goal in showing you these lists is to get you thinking about your possibilities. You might not see your exact job title on here, and that's fine. But hopefully, as you're looking at these and hearing, some of the most popular, fast growing and common flexible career fields, you're starting to see or get some ideas in your mind about what you might be able to look for. You're realizing the possibilities for your specific flexible job search for this year. All right, so every year, FlexJobs puts out a top 100 list of the 100 companies with the most remote jobs. So we look at all of the companies, we have over 57,000 in our database, and look at which companies posted or had the most remote opportunities over the last year. So in addition to the wide variety of jobs and career fields we just talked about, there are so many different companies of all different sizes who offer flexible work options. These are some of the top companies for remote jobs on the slide. And as you can see, they come from industries like communications, healthcare, technology, education. There's some staffing firms, just to name a few. So here are the top 30. Of course, our list is 100 companies, and we've included that in the resources. And you can find those other companies that support flexible work options by visiting the jobs and companies section on the FlexJobs site, or by going to the guide with the best companies for flexible jobs. And all of that is in the resource section, and we will also email that to you as well. Which would be helpful and will be helpful, because now we're going to talk about finding companies and jobs so that you can pinpoint specific job listings and companies that might work for you moving forward. One thing though, before we dive into that, I think it's critical to understand from the start is that your location, your specific location matters in a remote job search. Now, this was not intuitive to me when I started looking for a remote job because I knew I could work remotely from anywhere. Just like most of you know, you can re work remotely from anywhere, but that's not how it works for companies. The vast majority of remote job listings do have some type of location requirement. In fact, only 5% of remote jobs are actually work from anywhere jobs. Now, why is this? Because we can work from anywhere. Well, companies have to adhere to their local city, state, country employment laws, regulations, tax laws, and regulations. So they are not necessarily set up to be able to hire somebody from anywhere in the world. Some companies set location requirements too for training requirements. There might be a licensing requirement for your job that you have to be licensed in a particular state or country in order to do the work. Companies might want you to be located regionally near an airport so that you can travel if you need to. And it might just depend on where your clients are if you are a client-facing role. So these are some of the reasons that companies do have location requirements for the remote jobs. I think it's important that when you search for remote jobs, you search using your location. So in your job search, any jobs that aren't available where you are would actually be filtered out of your search results, particularly on the FlexJobs site, as we have those filters. So when you're looking to find companies that offer flexible work, you know, the type of work that you want, whether it's fully remote, hybrid, or etc., we recommend you make a list of those companies so you can have a more laser focused search for yourself. You can find companies listed in lists that I've mentioned already, the FlexJobs Company Guide. We have a lot of information about each company, so you can see what their remote work policies are. You can even look at job openings and link to their social pages and company website. You can also look for clues on the company's career pages because not all companies make their flexible work options clear in job descriptions, but they do often discuss things like work-life balance and flexibility on their career pages. So looking at the FlexJobs Guide, of course, the top 100 list, going directly to companies' career pages and their website is also something that can be very beneficial. And I think too, sometimes this gets overlooked, but think of all the companies you've had contact with, products and services you love, former vendors you've worked with personally or professionally. And if remote work is on your list of ideal flexibility, you're really opening your options to include all sorts of companies outside your geographic area, provided they have positions available. If you've already had some kind of experience with a particular company, it gives you something extra to talk about in your cover letter when you're interviewing, or if you reach out to somebody on LinkedIn, it kind of helps rebuild or build some rapport. Of course, don't forget alums from your alma mater. They might have insights to share about their own workplaces and if if they're able, excuse me, to have flexible work options as well. All right, so we talked a little bit about finding flexible companies. Now, how do you find flexible job listings? There are a lot of really great resources out there. And of course, I will start with FlexJobs. We pre-screen and research and vet all jobs before they are posted to the FlexJobs site. So they are not scams, they are legitimate opportunities. So FlexJobs is a place that you can trust the jobs that are posted. If you're using another job board, I always recommend looking at similar job sites that might specialize in something like Skill Crush has a list of the top 25 job sites to look for a remote job. For example, Rob has one for freelance jobs. So there's many different niche job boards out there that you can look at. Again, looking at industry and professional associations in your field of choice also can lead you to different job boards. And that's one of the reasons they're really good groups to seek out because they typically have their own job boards and also they offer networking opportunities. And speaking of networking, don't be quiet about your job search. Ask your friends, family, neighbors, and professional network. How did they find their last job? What sources were helpful for them? Are they working flexibly and how? And how were they able to secure a job like that? Arming yourself with information is really beneficial in this climate in terms of landing your next job. And just a little bit more on networking. Networking is such a critical component to your job search. But also, since more people have had the opportunity to work remotely since 2020, it's likely that you know people who work remotely. And if you don't, if you haven't had that opportunity, you can kind of talk to your friends and family about what they really like about remote work, how they make it happen. Certainly you can lean into them for professional recommendations, and you should. They might have some ideas for jobs or companies that you could search for, but if they are working remotely and you wonder or have any questions about what it's like to work remotely, or if you don't have a specific office in your house, but you have an area that you might be able to work, you could ask people, how do they get that set up? Do they really like it? Do they have a side hustle? It really just is an information gathering practice when you are consistently networking. So we highly recommend doing that as part of your job search. All right. Networking is a component, as I said, but when you are doing, searches on job boards or online for jobs, you want to keep in mind a few things when you're looking for remote work. There are some phrases that might give you better results than others. Certainly, phrases like work from home and work at home. We used to at FlexJobs, really tell people to avoid those phrases like work from home and work at home because they were mostly used by scammers prior to the pandemic. But we found once the pandemic started, reputable companies started using that phraseology. So what we recommend now is that you do a little bit more due diligence for those phrases that you see because we've seen such an increase in legitimate companies using those phrases. Be cautious with them as scammers still do use work from home, work from anywhere, but it's important to know that it doesn't necessarily signal for sure that something is a scam. And we'll talk more about scams later, as I promised. But employers also use many different phrases to describe their remote jobs. We found that remote, telecommute, virtual, and hybrid are really the most common now. And it's a good idea to stick with those when searching online. We also highly recommend you look for remote search filters on any job search websites to help you target remote jobs. On FlexJobs, you can search 100% remote jobs as a filter or hybrid jobs as a filter. The other thing that you want to keep in mind is you can expand your search terms beyond job titles. So you could search for a job like, I like to do public speaking and facilitation. So I might use the keyword public speaking plus manager. If I was looking for a job and I wanted to cover many different industries. So on the FlexJob site, if you would use that phrase public speaking plus manager, the job search results are going to yield you any job that has both public speaking and manager in the job title or job description. And so that's going to give you a wider variety of jobs that you might consider that already have some of the skills that you know are your strengths, and that can help you identify jobs that you might be able to do or apply for, and it can expand your search if you're having a hard time, with the searches that you're doing currently. All right. So as I mentioned, scams, I do want to give a little bit more information on those because they are an unfortunate, but really real part of the flexible job search, especially for work from home jobs. So on the list on the slide, this is a list of the main warning signs. Like if you get reached out to by somebody that has a generic email address like Gmail or Yahoo rather than a company name or a company email address, if there's vague or no job description, if someone's asking you for money or very personal information, if everything is done on instant messenger, if there's an immediate job offer without an interview and like this insane sense of urgency, these are all signs of scams. Now, having one of these doesn't necessarily mean it's a scam, but it certainly requires you to do a bit more due diligence. And that is what we recommend. Everybody that we hear from that has been scammed says that they knew something was off in their gut and they didn't trust their instincts. So you really want to trust your gut on this. I've been um, scammed with my computer and someone logging into my computer from offsite. And I knew it was wrong, but they had a fake website that was very similar to the Apple support website. And you can see that URLs can be very sneaky too. And so really trust your instincts because if something doesn't feel quite right, it likely isn't. And you owe it to yourself to kind of avoid some of the ramifications of falling for a scam, to do your due diligence before moving further. Here are some things that you can do to do that research on a job or company that you think might be a scam. The first thing to do is like a keyword search for the company's name and the job title, and then the word scam. So you could do that in Google or whatever browser you use. This might uncover local news reports like BBB complaints, that's the Better Business Bureau, FBI warnings, and even other evidence of scamming. The second thing that you can do is with a well-known company, you can search the company's name and keyword careers to find their actual career website. Compare the web address you found with the one you are concerned about, and if they're not the same, you likely found a scam site. And feel free to reach out to the company if you feel fairly certain that you've identified a scam. I've seen job postings over the last couple of years that as you're reading it, the company will say, nobody from our company will contact you in this way. If, like it will mention that they have had some scams and kind of alert you what to look for in terms of jobs, what's legitimate and what's not. All right, so we've talked about the popular job categories, fields that are growing rapidly, the companies that are offering remote jobs, how you can find both of those. So now, once you've identified some jobs that you would like to apply for at companies that you are interested in working with, how do you position yourself to be the best flexible job applicant or remote job applicant, since most of you are looking for some level of remote? So the first thing you need to do is think about the skills you already have that would make you a great remote worker. Now, when we survey employers, they say that these skills are really important for flexible professionals to demonstrate. And some of these might not be a surprise to you. Written and verbal communication, time and task management, being proactive, having a comfort with technology and problem solving and troubleshooting. You do not have to be a technology expert to work remotely. Now, if you're in the IT field, that's a different story. But also, important to employers is being able to kind of roll with the punches, embracing change, having a growth mindset because things in the remote world really do and digital world change very quickly. Just thinking about where AI was a year ago to where it is today, and it's continuing to evolve. You have to be willing to embrace that change and learn new things. Also, being familiar with digital communication tools that really help remote work be successful, things like Slack, Zoom, Big Marker, those types of things are important as well. So when it comes to these digital communication skills I just mentioned, the good news is they're really easy to build. There are common programs and tools used by flexible remote teams in areas like instant messaging, video conferencing. I already mentioned Zoom. Slack is an instant messaging app or program that many companies use. File sharing and document collaboration like Google Workspace, Dropbox, Microsoft Office, virtual office environments, Sococo, Microsoft Teams is another one that kind of fits a couple of these. So each of these usually offers a free version or a free trial. So pick one or two in the areas that you might want to learn. Ask your family or friends to help you so you have someone to communicate with using these platforms. Also, you might find some really great tutorials on YouTube for most of these programs that would be free. Now, I will say, we get asked a lot, how do you know which tools you should learn? And I think the best way to figure that out is as you're perusing job descriptions that you are interested in applying for, to sort of keep tally of what programs are mentioned: Google Workspace, Dropbox, Microsoft Office, Slack, CRM, like SaaS systems, that kind of thing. And once you do that over like maybe 10 different job postings, whichever tools are mentioned the most is where I would start or prioritize your learning efforts on those that show up the most in the just different job descriptions that you're looking forward to applying for. All right, your resume is also something that you're going to need to update specifically when applying for flexible and remote jobs. So the question you want to ask yourself is if you have any previous flexible work experience or not. Now, this experience includes working from home, of course, but it doesn't have to be a formal relation, like a formal arrangement. It could be occasionally, like if your kids were sick or you're sick, or it might be that you had somewhat of a flexible schedule or you were working part-time or freelancing. It can also be experiences like working in the office, but working across time zones or using digital collaboration tools with an office team. So some people might actually be thinking, oh, I actually have more remote experience than I thought about. It just wasn't a formalized situation. So if that's you, you can let us know in the chat, but also just keep in mind that you might have more remote work experience than you are thinking. So ask yourself for any potential experience you have. Could you talk about it, how you were productive and effective and efficient in that arrangement? And if so, that's going to count for flexible or remote work. And if you truly don't have any flexible experience, that's really okay. Then you're going to focus, of course, on all the great skills you have to be a productive and effective, flexible or remote worker. And then we're going to talk about very briefly, like how you can put this remote work experience on your resume, like I have here: marketing coordinator, freelance. You can add the location as remote, just like this. So here's some examples of how you can call out your remote experience on your resume. The first place would be in line with your job titles. In the first instance, this was a faculty position at a university and it was fully remote work. And you can see how that is listed. In the second position, it's another remote role, but fully remote is just underneath the job title as opposed to underneath the date. And finally, for a hybrid job, you could put the percentage of how much remote work you did, or you could simply put hybrid work. Those are different options for you to really make it apparent to the employer and quick and easy to see when you add that to the job title section of your resume. You also can highlight some of these remote friendly skills we've been talking about in your resume summary. There are 3 samples of a summary and key skills section on the slide. This goes at the top of your resume, and you can see some of these remote or flexible friendly skills that I've underlined. These parts can easily be updated every time you apply for a job, but you can see things like written and verbal communication skills, project managers and local remote teams, that's working with them. In the second example, having team effectiveness and productivity through communication, 6 years experience working remotely and in flexible office environments. And finally, in the last one, a sentence like skilled at team collaboration while working independently in remote environments. So you're telling and showing the employer about your remote experience right at the top of your resume. It's also really helpful to have a technology section on your resume, especially if you're a remote worker or if the job that you are applying for requires a lot of technology skills. This shows an employer that you have a familiarity and a comfort with various technologies. Use the job description to determine specifically which ones you might mention. And as you learn more of the remote collaboration programs we've talked about in the presentation today, you can add them to this section. So in the first example, just flatly saying remote communication tools like email, video, conferencing, phone, and the specific platforms: GoToMeeting, Zoom. Effective when communicating remotely or over the phone: email and video chat. And in the last example, tools used for effective remote work, and then going through and listing those tools. Now, I want to go back to the top example. The bottom bullet says adapts quickly to new and changing technology. I always liked adding something like that to the resumes I worked on because it shows, again, a growth mindset and embracing change and learning, being a lifelong learner. And that's really highlighting it for the employer right there in your technology section. So, in those three resume sections, the job titles, the technology skills, and the resume summaries, you can really highlight your remote work experience. So, that's what you want to do. Now, other action steps that you want to take as you are starting or continuing on your job search this year is, again, you want to research your career field to see what's being offered in the type of flexibility that you are seeking. Then you want to identify what remote friendly skills and experiences you have so you can get that added to your resume, your LinkedIn profile, other digital profiles, and cover letters. That comes to updating your application materials and online profile. So those two are really tied together. And then once you know kind of what you're looking for, where you're going, what direction your job search is going to go in, make sure you're interacting with your network and doing and committing to networking, every day at a minimum every week in your job search. And then, of course, the actual application process. Apply for the remote and flexible jobs that you want to do that are the type of remote work and flexible work that you're looking for, and have an established follow-up plan to follow up on those applications as you move forward. All right, as promised, we're going to do some questions in just a second. I do want to remind everybody that we're going to email this to you, the recording and the resources within the next few days. And for any questions that you have on any part of your job search, please check out the FlexJobs blog, because that has so many thousands of articles on any part of your job search. And I don't want you to miss out on any of that. And we look forward to seeing what questions you have. So let's go ahead and get to those questions.
All right, everyone, we are going to move into the Q&A portion of our webinar now. Before I dive into your questions, could someone confirm for me in the chat section that you're able to hear me clearly? All right, wonderful. Thank you for that. Somebody was on top of it. So my name is Keith Spencer, and I'm one of our career experts here at FlexJobs, and I will be answering your questions for you. So let's head over to that Q&A section together, and I will answer our questions based on the number of upvotes. So remember to click that thumbs up button if you see a question that you also want to hear the answer to. So our first question here says, I have recent remote experience, so why is it so hard lately to find something remote? And then they also shared that they are looking for something related to accounts payable. So let's talk about just remote in general, and then we can also talk about the accounts payable aspect here. But so, as Tony, shared during the presentation, remote and flexible and hybrid job postings are continuing to grow. The problem is the supply is not necessarily outpacing the demand, because the vast majority of working professionals and job seekers want some type of flexibility, whether it's fully remote or hybrid or flexible schedule or what have you. The demand is outpacing supply. So even though the remote opportunities are there, the competition is much fiercer than it may have been, in the past or even just a couple of years ago. So that's important to keep in mind, because you want to make sure that in your applications, you are focusing on, quality over quantity. What I mean by that is I would much rather send out just a handful of well-tailored or highly tailored, customized applications each week than dozens and dozens of applications each week, or even hundreds of applications each week. So, the time of the generic sort of one size fits all resume and the cookie cutter cover letter, we are kind of past that. Employers now want job seekers or applicants, I should say, who are taking the time to really understand the needs and the priorities of that employer, really understand the requirements and responsibilities of the role, and then are showing that they are a good fit through their application materials. So tailoring their application materials for each specific role. And I know that sounds like a really time consuming suggestion there, and it is a bit more time consuming than sending out that one size fits all resume. But if you've ever been in a webinar with me, you may have heard me share this tip. What I do every time I'm job searching is I think about my target roles, right? There's usually somewhere along the lines of like 2 to 4 target roles that I am going after. With this example, we have accounts payable here. So I will create sort of a base resume for each one of my, target roles. So let's say the person who asked this question was looking for accounts payable, but then was also interested in accounts receivable. You could create 2 different base resumes. Now, those roles have a lot of similarities, but they also have their nuances. So you could create 2 different base resumes that focus on the nuances and intricacies of both of those types of roles. You still have the same past jobs on them and everything like that, but the way that you describe your past jobs, the skills that you're emphasizing, the accomplishments that you're highlighting, that's going to be different for each base resume based on what your target audience wants to see. And again, your target audience are recruiters and hiring managers looking to fill those roles. So then once you have your base resumes, as you find jobs that you want to apply for, you can think, okay, this is my accounts payable resume, or this is my accounts receivable resume. And then you make a copy of that base resume. You would rename it, your first name, last name, resume for whatever the company's name is. And then you could do a bit more tweaking and modifying of that resume, usually focusing the bulk of your tailoring efforts on your summary and key skills section at the top to really, tailor and customize it even further for that specific role. So you're already starting out with a resume, a base resume that is kind of in a general sense tailored for your target role. And then when you find specific roles you want to apply for, you can tailor even further. So that's a really important step, that is going to increase the likelihood of you landing an interview, as are some of the other things that Tony recommended, like networking, for example. But in terms of finding jobs, and you mentioned, accounts payable, you might mean more literally, like I can't find open roles on, FlexJobs or different job search sites for accounts payable. Well, keep in mind that, employers often like to get a little, I'll say like creative in how they are titling different jobs that they have available. So you might see this sort of evolution of the title accounts payable, specialist or whatever, into different things. So, you could use accounts payable specialist, clerk, coordinator, analyst. So, you might tag some keywords on the back of it. You might shorten accounts payable when you're searching and do like AP specialist, AP clerk. You could look at, some broader like accounting and finance terms, like accounting clerk, finance assistant. Like try to get, what I'm saying is, because employers get creative with their naming of different roles, you should get creative in the terms you are using to look for open roles. So hopefully both of those suggestions there on tailoring, and then also diversifying your search parameters, I guess I'll call it, will be helpful for you. But thank you for asking that question, and let's try to squeeze in a few more questions. Okay, so next one here. How long does it typically take to land a remote job compared to an in-office role? So this is hard to say. It's this type of thing that sort of fluctuates over time. Like typically you hear, the average job search can take up to like 6 to 8 months. But, we've also heard people going longer than that. We've also heard people having a shorter job search than that. So, I can't give you an exact number right there. Or to answer that question. But, what I would say is just keep in mind that yes, competition is fierce for remote roles. So you want to put that best effort forth and focus on that quality over quantity. But then also consider, potentially, diversifying your ideal flex, like how Tony was talking about. Like if you think about like, okay, my ideal flex is I would ideally like 100% remote. I would also ideally like a flexible schedule. So like those are my top 2. Well, which one of those is more important to me? Because, I would be, for me personally, I do have 100% remote and I do have flexible schedule. the flexible schedule is more important to me. So if I had to go back in person, I would be willing to do that if it meant I could keep a flexible schedule. So be thinking about, what are your ideal scenario, what's your nice to have scenario, what are your deal breakers, and be willing to, kind of flex on that as much as you can, because that can shorten the length of your job search. And also keep in mind too, I'm not necessarily recommending that you find a job and then leave immediately, but just because you find a job and accept an offer and begin a job, that doesn't mean that you can't continue to look for other roles that are better aligned with your needs and preferences. So, if you're willing and able, because of course not everybody's the same, you could, expand some of your search criteria, and that could decrease your time to hire, so to speak. But yeah, like I mentioned earlier, demand for remote roles is high, flexible roles is high. So just by nature of having like increased competition, it could take you longer to find a remote job compared to an in-office role. But that doesn't necessarily guarantee that that is going to be the case, especially if you are, taking into account some of the other advice that Tony shared and I shared with that last question. So hopefully that is helpful for you. Thank you for asking that question. Okay, so another good one here. So how to network if I'm looking for a remote job and nobody in my network knows about the company that I'm looking into. So yeah, this is a really good question. Also a good strategy to be, thinking about your target companies, companies that you like for whatever reason. Maybe you found them on a list like, Tony was suggesting or sharing. But what you would want to do in this situation, because this happens more often than not. Often you don't know people at the companies that you are targeting. What you want to do is, sort of try your best to increase your visibility with that company, with the people that work at that company online, like through a social networking site like LinkedIn. So if I were in this exact scenario, what I would do first is I would go to that company's page on LinkedIn and I would make sure I'm following that company, because I want to see their updates. I want to see the posts that they put. I want it to populate in my news feed, right? So then after I have followed that company, I can consider, maybe engaging with some of their posts. Like, of course, I'm going to like their posts. Maybe I comment on them. Maybe I share them. Maybe I share my own thoughts in the comments and things like that. Show my appreciation and support of what that company does. That's helping me increase my visibility. But also on that company's profile page on LinkedIn, I'm going to go to their people tab and I'm going to start looking through all the people that work at that company. And I'm going to, prioritize ones that are working, in the types of roles that I would maybe want to be working in, or on the types of teams that I would want to be working on. But then I would also look to see if I can find anybody who is a recruiter, who works in talent acquisition, or who maybe works in HR. And then I'm going to start following those people on LinkedIn, because on LinkedIn, you can either follow someone, which is a bit more sort of surface level. You can really follow anybody, or you can send a connection request, which is a bit more deeper, a bit more intimate. So I would start by following all those people that I had identified. And then hopefully some of them, like the company itself, will post things on LinkedIn, and I will try to increase my visibility with those individuals. So I would like their posts. I would maybe comment on their posts or share their posts. I would also start, as I gained more comfortability doing this, start sharing my own organic posts about my, area of expertise, again, just to increase visibility. And then as you kind of, begin to cultivate relationships with people in this way, then you could start saying like, hey, I'm really interested in your company. Could I send you some questions? Or you can maybe ask them like, hey, I'd really love to learn more about what you do. Would you be willing to have, like a 20-minute coffee chat with me over Zoom or something like that? Like, that's how you can network with people through LinkedIn in a completely remote way, without, knowing anybody at that organization first. And, this absolutely does work. I started, increasing my engagement on LinkedIn about 2 years ago. And I have met a ton of other career experts and career professionals. I have forged relationships with a lot of them. I've gotten some of them to come here and do presentations for our audience. I've been asked to do presentations for other audiences outside of FlexJobs. So really just increasing your visibility and forging relationships can lead to a lot of cool opportunities. Now, I will say that it is sort of a long process and a slow game, so to speak. But I am not someone who is actively job searching right now. But by doing that while gainfully employed, I now have a broader network that I could potentially lean on if I were to begin job searching. So it's really something that I encourage people to do, regardless of what stage of your career or your job search you are in. But don't neglect your network. Look to build your network. Look to build your visibility, and that's how I would do it if I knew no one at the target company that I was looking at. So hopefully that is helpful for you. I know that was a bit of a longer response than you were probably looking for, but there were some important elements I wanted to make sure to get in there. But let me try to squeeze in just one or two other questions here. Let's see. Okay, so besides LinkedIn, what other online sites should I update my profile? So really, it kind of depends on where you're looking for jobs, what you're looking for, because if you are, for example, like if you are in like tech, you would want to have, or like you're a programmer or a computer engineer or something like that. You would want to have like a GitHub, so to speak. So you could have, your code out there or any projects that you've worked on. Maybe you're in sort of a creative field and you want to have like your own website and portfolio. You could definitely do that. Maybe you are like in marketing and communication. So all social media sites are relevant to your job search. You'd want to have, your profiles updated on other job search sites, or excuse me, social media sites. Maybe you use lots of different job search sites. You'd want to have a profile on there. So it kind of comes down to like what you're looking for, what your preference is. LinkedIn's definitely a good one. Having an up-to-date profile on any job search sites you're using is smart. There's also, you could use bold.pro. That's sort of a nice recruitment or sourcing tool that you could look into as well. But just making sure that, when you are updating those profiles, it's a little bit different than the very targeted, tailored resume strategy that I was mentioning. You want your online profiles to be a bit broader and apply to a little bit of a wider audience than your individual application materials. So make sure that you're kind of considering your audience in a broader sense and showcasing and highlighting the aspects of your background that will apply more generally to your audience. So hopefully that's helpful. I do want to squeeze in one other question here. All right, so this person is saying, I love FlexJobs, but since the listings are so well vetted, sometimes roles at smaller places slip through, especially writer roles. Do you all have any other remote job boards you can recommend as trustworthy? So the trustworthy part makes it a little difficult because as far as I know, FlexJobs is the only one out there with a team of researchers that is vetting and verifying job postings. So I don't want to necessarily say to you, yes, go trust this job site and this job site, because not all job boards are doing that. So keep in mind the red flags that Tony mentioned. Make sure you're educating yourself and keeping an eye out for scams. That being said, absolutely, like I always recommend to people, like, check out niche job boards. Like FlexJobs is a niche job board focused on remote, hybrid, and flexible roles. There are other niche job boards out there. So if you went to your search engine of choice or like your AI tool of choice and typed in, for this example, you're talking about writer roles, writer focused job boards or something like that as your search criteria, you are likely going to find a lot of good options out there. You could do the same for any other area or field or industry of interest, and look for niche job boards in those fields. Like, for example, I actually started my career as a teacher, and teacher jobs, typically you don't find them on your more general job boards like your LinkedIn's or your Indeeds and things like that, and you typically find them only on, education specific job boards. So yeah, definitely check out some niche job boards that are out there. But I don't want to necessarily mention like specific ones because of that trustworthy aspect of your question, because, unlike FlexJobs, I cannot, state that these other job boards are vetting and verifying their postings. But definitely check out some niche job boards. Never hurts to diversify your approach to job searching. So hopefully that is helpful for you. We are quite a bit over our allotted time here, so we are going to go ahead and draw to a close. Really appreciate you all taking the time to join us. I hope that both Tony's presentation and the Q&A were valuable for you. Highly encourage you to check out some of our future webinars. We have one, let's see, coming up tomorrow. Is today Tuesday already? Yeah. So tomorrow, February 5th, at 11 a.m. Eastern, we have a webinar about writing your resume for remote jobs. And then on Thursday, February 6th, we actually have an external presenter coming in, Dr. Gleb Sapersky. He is going to be talking about becoming a hybrid or remote work leader using behavioral science. So that should be a pretty interesting webinar as well. So definitely consider checking out some of our future webinars. Again, really appreciate you all taking the time to join us today. Sincerely hope that this was beneficial for you all. And I wish you all the best of luck in your job search. Take care.